All right. So let's hear what you got. Thoughts, initial ideas, considerations. What do we got? Yeah, Kings.
The part that really stood out to me was when the main theme got shifted to the piano and the violin was playing pizzicato. I thought that part was really cool.
Yeah.
I also thought it was very interesting the use of pizzicato throughout this piece, like especially ending on it, just like I thought that was very interesting as well.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the ending? There's time signature change, big tempo shift.
I mean, there's more than one movement, so it probably adds something to the beginning of the second.
Yeah, good. Other thoughts, not necessarily about the ending, but just about the movement in general.
I just like how he takes like melodies and themes and kind of transforms them throughout the piece. Like we get the really lyrical like triplet melody in the beginning, and then he takes that same melody and kind of speeds it up, and you hear like the piano like driving it really. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, good. Abby?
This has some very typical like violin no-nos. So
How so?
like there's some fingerings that like when you see them right off the bat, they're really strange. Like the way that it moves between sections. So when we first had there's no measure numbers. It's that the spots I keep mentioning on the third to last page, the chromatic movement with the violin is playing that really high note. It's moving stepwise, and it's going and it's crawling up, and then if you keep going, it looks that part at the top.
Yeah,
that is so strange to see because that D to the G sharp, it would be a fifth, but it's not, and then the A to the C, the spaces are really weird, especially coming down from all of those things.
Interesting.
It's like mock classical music, almost.
Right.
Some of the things, especially like the beginning, the chords, like you think, this is gonna be this rich, like Beethoven kind of thing, and then it's not. It's like there's just something off. Like there's a lot of F sharps to B flats or B flats to F sharps.
Yes.
That distance is, you wouldn't expect it.
Right, yeah. And so Carlos and I were talking while you guys were in your groups about the kind of the curiosity of the title. And someone in my last section mentioned this too. She said, I saw the title African Dances, so I had an idea in my head of what I was anticipating it sounding like. And then it started and it was not that. And one thing that Carlos mentioned was, maybe this is Coleridge-Taylor's attempt to like classicalize something non-Western. And so what Abby is talking about, these intervals that are not intuitive to play, maybe we're seeing a little bit of that, this kind of like blending of two different things, and how that comes across to us as people who are very kind of imbued in the Western classical tradition. Like what is that like for us as potential performers of this or as consumers of it? Yeah, Savannah, did you have a hand up? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, James.
It seems to be in like really short sections, like they evolve really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, G minor does not last very long at the beginning. Then there's like 2.5 sections of like the sustained notes. And it's just like it changes really quickly, and I feel like a lot of things barely come back. It's kind of a little of that, except for the violin. The violin's always been the same, like or
Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Sophia.
So this is gonna be hard to quantify, but this song for whatever reason plays really well with my synesthesia. So like in the violin specifically, it's just like it's green the whole way through, which is not something that always happens. In the piano kind of has this like dark horse quality to it as it comes up and moves. And it gets a little bit harder to, I guess, delineate as the piece continues because the texture gets a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
And when you're just looking at some of these like measure 48 on, it has that kind of like shimmery spaced out accompaniment in the piano. And I liked it as texture, like kind of thickens you're getting a little bit more tension as it continues.
Mhm.
Like for me, the colors were still like quite present.
Yeah, yeah.
It was nice to listen to because the theme carried through, even though the evolution of the piece overall was pretty quick.
Right, right.
The themes and like I guess the mood of the piece itself was quite consistent. Even though there were little like more annotations and extra things that were being added on as the piece continued.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
still kind of got the same mood at the beginning as it did at the end, just
Right.
amped up a couple notches.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Good. So a couple people now have mentioned this idea of evolution of things, be it thematic material. We're going to talk about key areas kind of more on Wednesday. But that is actually sort of where we're gonna focus for today is we're really just gonna take the first page, so the first front and back page, first 50 measures or so, and really kind of zoom in on how Coleridge-Taylor takes this nugget in measure 1 and sort of blooms it out towards this theme, and then how he continues to connect one section to the other, because kind of like James said, that it's a lot of short things that evolve really quickly and then like boom, you're into something else. So you have to kind of move quickly with it, but there's so much happening, and there's so much happening this way too, kind of like a cross section that we can connect. So that's really going to be our focus today. So I'm going to play this again just through measure 54, which is on the second page. And I want you to grab a pencil and give me, please, as you're listening, where you hear the major thematic areas and what keys you're hearing those major themes in. So this is from the beginning, and we'll just play through the first 54-ish measures. Stop it there because it gets super exciting. But let's talk theme zones. So first off, what key are we on? What key are we in right off the bat? G minor, yeah. So a question, how many of you have the first theme starting on the first measure? How many of you have it measure 4? So we've got this sort of like, I'm just gonna call it introduction, and we can rename this stuff later. And then theme A, I'm gonna call it, sort of drops in pretty much when the piano enters. So I'm gonna play just the first couple measures again. I want you to do me a favor and close your eyes so you're not looking at the score. And I want you to think, as you're listening, think about how you might conduct this had you I'm asking you to erase your memory. Had you not seen the score, how would you conduct this? I want you to just play around, close your eyes if you have to, wipe out your memory of what this looks like, and play around with some conducting. Here it is. I'm gonna do it one more time. just watching, those of you who are outwardly conducting, what I was seeing was a lot of downbeats here. So I was seeing a lot of conducting of that. Ba-ba-dum, ba-ba-dum. So that was your anacrusis, and then a lot of you were dropping the downbeat when we get to the G. Now, full disclosure, first time I ever listened to this, I did the same thing I asked you guys to do. So whenever I am kind of going through pieces to scan for class, I do the same thing I asked you guys to do for free write, which is I listen to it once without the score, and then I listen to it once with the score, and then start kind of digging into it. And when I listened to this without the score, I was so ingrained in my mental meter by measure 4 that when the piano came in, I had to like reinvent the meter that I had placed for myself because it was now clearly incorrect. So I think that's a really interesting way to open up a piece, right? Because if you're sitting in an audience or sitting, in a performance of this, you don't have the score in front of you. You don't know where the downbeat is. You sort of kind of pick up through these first couple of beats when the piano comes in, because the meter that you have created and watching you guys conduct through that, the meter that most of you did create revolved around a downbeat that was not the actual notated downbeat. So there's really cool kind of shift that happens when the theme does come in. Where do we have the theme B starting?
Mhm.
23. Did I have anybody put a theme B here at 19? A couple? Yeah. So so we have two, my other class, we did kind of the same thing. We had two potential like theme B question marks. One here at 19 and one here where the violin returns at 23. And this is very similar to the discourse we just had up here, right? 4 measures of intro, and then boom, there's theme A. We've got like 4 measure interlude of sorts. Yeah, Carlos.
Yeah, so I guess in my mind, I would say, if you're gonna say that the first 4 measures up there are the intro, then over here would be like intro too.
Yeah.
Exactly consistent whether or not you choose to name it an intro or not.
Right. So kind of having whichever one you choose being parallel between the two. Yeah, being consistent between your two. So if you've got intro here for measures 1 through 4, yeah, maybe you call this intro B or interlude or something like that. And the goal here, the musical goal, is just plopping us in G major, right? Because think about it, we went from G minor to G major. G minor, G major is what relationship? Parallel, good. Parallel major and minor. The beauty of that transition is parallel major and minor keys share a dominant. So you do not have to prepare the listener in any special way to drop into the parallel major. You just slap a dominant on. And then when you get to the next down, you change May into me or vice versa, and boom, there you are in your parallel major or minor key. So these 4 measures, 19 to 22, they're just settling us in. They're getting us comfortable in our new key of G major before we start our theme B kind of proper with the violin. Now, I'm really curious, did anyone have any sort of mark or thoughts or considerations about these 4 measures? So sorry, it faded before some of you looked up. The 4 measures preceding the notated key change. What do we think about those, James?
It's just a pretty classic one in like transition. Just like they just established probably like some sort of into G major with the chords and the
Yeah. So let's take that idea, this idea of the harmonies underneath establishing something for us. And can you give me, please, start with root and quality because it's a little bit chromatic, but can you give me, please, root and quality of these 4 chords that lead us into our G major section. Start with root and quality, and if you feel comfortable and confident, you can turn that into some Roman numerals. Some are going to be more challenging than others. And let's put ears on them too. So here's that first harmony. So think about quality of something. And then next one. Next one's here. And then we go here.
Can you play the third one again?
The third one, yes. So
I knew it, I knew it.
and keep in mind as you're doing this too, you do have a key signature all the way over on the left. So make sure you're invoking those accidentals as you're working these qualities out. That first harmony. What quality is it? Her? Dominant. Yeah, who's root?
That's what I'm interested.
Oh, the first one?
Yeah.
E flat.
Yeah, E flat. So E flat dominant for that first chord. Dominant chords have to be a 5/7 of somebody. So E flat dominant. Pretend E flat is so. Who would do be? A flat. Good. Where do we go in the next measure? A flat major. Wonderful. So we go E flat dominant to A flat major. And then this third chord, this is what Abby asked me to play again. Orally, this is probably the trickiest one. I'll give it another play. But eyes or ears, you do have an E flat in there, and that does make a difference in terms of quality. What do we have for the root of this? A, yeah. A is the root, so we've got A, C, E flat, G. I'll play it just stacked. What quality is that triad on the bottom?
Oh, diminished.
Yeah, diminished triad, major third on top. So what quality do we have? Yeah, good. So we've got A half diminished 7. And it goes to where? What's that last harmony? Who's the root of this one? F sharp's not the root. D is the root. Yeah, we've got D, F sharp, A, and C. So who is that? Yeah, good. D dominant. So I'll play it as it's notated. Your leading tone is right there, which is why I couldn't help myself from doing that. So D dominant, and like I said, we're transitioning here from G minor to G major, parallel major minor. All you gotta do is stick a 5/7 in there, and off you go into your new key. So now let's think about this in terms of Roman numerals. We are still in G minor as per the key signature. So we can label this. Here's our 5/7, which also acts as our pivot into that kind of cold plunge into G major. The A half diminished 7 chord is also diatonic to the key of G minor. That the naturals here are just canceling out that chromaticism. So A half diminished 7 is going to get what Roman numeral in the key of G minor? Yeah, good. Now, here's the fun stuff. We said this had to be a 5/7 of somebody, and it does the right thing, right? It resolves the way we expect it to. So the E flat 7 is a 5/7 of A flat major gets what label in the key of G minor? Flat 2, also known as Imposing, yeah. So we actually saw this in the Nathaniel Dett piano piece that we did a while back, the Deserted Cabin. It had a tonicized Neapolitan. So same thing here. So 5/7 of Neapolitan, or if you want to label it that way. Now I know I spent like an entire week telling you about how the Neapolitan always has to be in first inversion because it gives you a nice bass line and all that kind of stuff. This is why I didn't do this piece 3 weeks ago. So we have this tonicized Neapolitan and then creeps its way up to the 2/7, 5/7, boom, 1 in G major. Now, I want you to look at the violin line for me. It doesn't do anything interesting for 98% of this section of this 4-measure excerpt, but the one thing it does that is super interesting is right here. Now, why do I say that that's interesting? Because the violin here on C sharp, think in solfege, your violin is on Phi. Where does Phi want to go? Phi, every time we sing it in oral skills, Phi resolves up to so, right? And that's exactly what the violin line does. Now I need you to look at the right hand of the piano. The right hand of the piano has a D flat. D flat and C sharp are the same key, right? And harmonically the same pitch. The D flat is part of the E flat dominant chord. Spell yourself an E flat dominant. E flat, G, B flat, D flat. D flat is the 7th. How does 7ths of chords resolve? Ah!
Down.
Down my step. That's the second thing that's going to be on my tombstone, right? Leading tones get raised in minor keys. Resolve your chordal 7ths down. So your chordal 7ths always resolve down by step. So this D flat that is in our piano, it is going to resolve down by half step in its resolution. So we have 2 pitches that are enharmonically the same. They're spelled in 2 different ways and they behave in 2 very different ways. Phi resolves up, the 7th of our E flat dominant resolves down. Now, that's kind of cool and interesting just sort of in its own right, but we actually get prepared for this way, way earlier on in the piece. So now can you jump up to the very beginning for me, please? And can you give me 3 Roman numerals for the first 3 chords, please? I'll play them each for you so you can get ears on them. So your first one sounds like this. Your next one sounds like this. Your next one sounds like this. There's a little interest in beat 3. So give me 3 Roman numerals. And just to help you out, remember that the last time I saw you 2 weeks ago, we had just introduced and we're just getting comfortable with and acquainted with the topic of augmented 6th chords. There's a reason this piece occurs now in the semester, so you might find yourself with one of those chords in this 3-chord mini progression. That's my nice way of saying you should have an augmented 6th chord. Here you go. So first harmony, G minor is our key. First harmony gives what? 1 chord, wonderful. Now, second harmony. If I told you to close your eyes and I played this for you and said, what quality is this? What would you say? Dominant. But then I ask you to look at the page. What is it? Yeah, good. So we go 1, German 6. Now, day that we learned how to resolve augmented sixth chords, I had a little keynote and I had a little meme that I made for you to help you remember how German sixes resolve. Where do German sixes go when they resolve? The CAD 6-4. Where does this go? Not a CAD 6-4, right? This goes directly to 5. But, so the reason that German sixes resolve to a CAD 6-4 first is so that we don't have parallel fifths between these two voices. So lay to may makes a perfect fifth, and then so to ray makes a perfect fifth. So the reason we pit stop at the CAD 6-4 is to stagger the resolution so you don't get parallel fifths. Fine. This German 6 goes directly to a 5, but Coleridge-Taylor also manages to save himself from the parallel fifths, and he does that by this, which is arguably probably the most interesting part of this passage, which is suspending that may over the chord change. So he keeps that B flat over B2, and then after everybody else has moved on to the 5, then he steps it down. So he saves himself from a little bit of part writing annoyance by having this really nice suspension here, which again I think is really pretty sounding on top of that as an added bonus. Reminder, we label suspensions by the interval size above the bass. So D to B flat, just what size is that? Don't worry about quality. Yeah. So we've got this nice 6-5 suspension in our like tenor-ish voice there. Now, the reason I had you do all of that is take a look at this German 6-5 and this nifty but kind of seemingly perhaps out of the blue 5-7 of the Neapolitan. We were talking about connections at the very beginning of class. So here's our theme A that opens up immediately with this chromatic predominant. And then we get to kind of this transition zone where James even said the violin is just hanging out and the piano is preparing us for the new key. The violin is mostly hanging out, but the one time it's not is it's this really cool critical cross relationship where the violin is still saying, yeah, and the piano is saying it is absolutely not. It is an E flat dominant, and we're gonna go to A flat, and then move ourselves into our next section. So it's a really cool cross relationship. We saw something similar with the Julie von Bebenau, the piano piece that we didn't have a recording of, so you got stuck just listening to me play it. There was a very similar cross relationship in that piece with a German 6-5 that got reborn as an applied dominant later on. Okay. We've got 8 minutes. We can do it. I'm going to listen again. We're going to listen just through the first 50-ish measures again. And I want you to mark on your score, if you don't have it already, where does the A theme start to infiltrate? Where does the A material start to seep in on that second page? So we're going to play from the beginning one last time. of theme A coming back to you? 43, yeah. So 43 is our first kind of hint of theme A. And we get that via the very first measure, right? This is not the same pitches, but it's the same rhythm, it's the same contour. So even though we're still kind of in theme B zone, we're starting to get this kind of creeping in of some theme A material. And we get it more here, and then it starts to like condense, right? And then this is the B flat to F sharp that Abby was talking about. That's a little counterintuitive and awkward to play. And then we hang out, we get that trill on F sharp. There's our leading tone. And again, G major, G minor, share a leading tone. There's our big old 5/7, and boom, there we go, back in G minor. And then we get our kind of introduction second time around, introduction 2.0 down here at the bottom of the page. Okay. I think I have enough time, maybe, to do one last thing. And that is, can you give me, please? We've already done, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. We already did this. So this is our E flat dominant again. So it's our 5/6/5 of the Neapolitan. And then it goes to 5/7. So root position Neapolitan to 5/7, which I told you never happens.
Except here.
Which I clearly was lying about. 5/7, and then goes to 1. Okay, now, can you do me a favor? And I'm going to ask you to cherry pick one chord for me. Can you give me, start with root and quality, but I'm up at measure 44. It's right before we get to our next 5/7 of Neapolitan. That one quarter note chord. Can you work it out for me, please? I'll play it for you. What quality was that? Yeah, good. Dominant quality. Whomst is the root? A. So A dominant. Or you can think of it as we're in G major, dominant quality chord built off of re. Re, fi, la, do. Who is that? 5/7 of who? Yeah, the very first applied dominant we learned, right? 5/7 of 5. Now, where do we expect 5/7 of 5 to go? To 5. It clearly does not, right? You can see, you don't even have to be great at theory to see that this is absolutely not a 5 chord. There are too many accidentals on that chord for it to be a 5 chord, right? 5/7 of 5, right back to this 5/7 of Neapolitan that we kind of keep coming back to. Now, in our last 2 minutes, I'm going to try and not make your heads hurt too much, but this is super, super cool. Ready? So, whenever you think of 5/7 in oral skills, we always call it so ti re fa, right? 5/7s are so ti re fa. In the middle there, that T and fa, that's your tritone. That is the only invertible interval in the system that inverts to itself. So if I play, here's T fa, that's tritone. If I invert it, fa to T, that's also a tritone. One of them is a diminished fifth and one's an augmented fourth, but the tritone inverts into itself. So here we have this E flat, this A dominant. So T, re, fa, if we were in that key. And it moves to this 5/7 of Neapolitan. So another dominant quality chord. So T, re, fa. I want you to look for me. Here's your tritone, right? Every dominant has a tritone. Here's your other tritone. Your A dominant tritone is C sharp and G. Your E flat dominant tritone is G and D flat. Same two pitches, right? We have just again reinterpreted, reinvented, especially that C sharp D flat duality that we've been harping on now for almost an hour. Does this look pretty in terms of like what your harmonic analysis looks like? No, it's a hot mess. And on my score, I just sort of leave it and then draw a big arrow to the D7 when it finally does like resolve. It's like this kind of this like hanging chad, unresolved 5, 7, and 5. But in terms of pitch parsimony, it shares half its notes with the next chord. And the next chord is that 5, 7 of the Neapolitan that we got introduced to way back in like measure 12. So these two dominant quality chords that are butting up against each other, do they have a functional relationship? No, not really. But they share their tritone, and we just turned it upside down and turned it into a new dominant quality chord. All right, that was a lot for your first day back after 2 weeks. Thank you for your attention. There's no homework. We are going to just keep on trucking with this piece. We're going to look really big picture on it on Wednesday. If you got any questions or comments or concerns, please come see me. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Wednesday morning. Oh.